What's going on, gamers? So there's an interesting comparison here. Though we know it's not going to beat it, I could have told people this, but it gives you an idea of how VRAM limits can be annoying. In this video, we're going to see a comparison of the PlayStation 5 console versus the RTX 5060 that just came out. We're going to demonstrate Alan Wake 2, Black Myth Wukong, and Forza Horizon 5, and then you're going to see the differences. You're going to see how much more powerful the 5060 is, but also how annoying it is. And Nvidia is still trying to play this cheap game, trailing out of companies like Microsoft, by giving you 8 gigabytes when that card should have 12 gigabytes minimum of VRAM. It's stupid, but when it's not restricted, you see it just blow it out the water. And we got to remember that the PS5 and the Series X, they're kind of like somewhere close to the 2070 and the 2070 Ti. So yeah, it does go that far back. Are we ready for this? Like, comment, subscribe, let me know what y'all think. Let's go. Let's see this comparison. I should have added in the Series X too.
There are problems here with the RTX 5060. 8 gigabytes of VRAM simply isn't enough, as you can see here. Monster Hunter Wilds, Marvel's Spider-Man.
It isn't if you want to run VRAM settings. So you literally have to tone down the VRAM settings, but you can turn up the other settings, and they always will have an advantage. But it is annoying, but yeah.
And 2, 1440p, not even on ultra settings, but we can't.
So you see, they're using high ray tracing, that's why.
Can't run these games with ray tracing enabled with just 8 gigs of memory. Similarly, the cutback PCIe Express interface also causes problems for budget systems still using the PCIe 3.0 standard, with performance drops that vary from just a few percent to something a lot more significant. All of these confounding factors are a shame, because when you see peak performance of the 5060, it's clearly a big upgrade over the 3060 and even scores well overall against the 4060, which hasn't been the case for much of the Blackwell lineup. And yeah, when you have a PCIe Gen 4 setup and you're not VRAM constrained, there are some good results here. In this visualization, you're seeing Black Myth Wukong running on the 5060 on close to equivalent PS5 settings against the PS5. In the PS5's performance mode, the opening level runs unlocked without the mandatory frame generation that the developer added for some reason, so it makes it a good benchmarking point.
Okay.
Here, the 5060 has a 20% performance advantage. And I say we're running on PS5 equivalent settings, but we're actually running with high quality textures that the PS5 mysteriously doesn't use, and we're outputting at 4K using DLSS performance mode up against native 1080p on the PS5.
So it's doing native and higher settings and it's still getting a frame advantage. That's a huge difference.
So yeah, the same internal resolution as PlayStation 5, but with the additional upscaling cost of DLSS, and we're still 20 points to the better. That's possibly a best case scenario, but here in Forza Horizon 5, the 5060 is able to match the PS5's 60 FPS performance mode with some overhead left over when we remove that 60 FPS cap. So in the middle there, I'm using the same 4x MSAA as the PlayStation 5, but on the right...
So we get an idea here of what the 5060 is getting as far as gains. Like, I would like to see the PS5 Pro go against the 5060, not the base PS5. But I guess they wanted to do this. When they do a Pro version, we got to look at this too. I would have liked to see the Series X added into this too. But I guess they just wanted to do the PlayStation 5, which is interesting.
I've taken a 4% performance hit to swap out MSAA for Nvidia DLAA for better image quality. Let's move on to Alan Wake 2, where I'm first of all comparing the 30 FPS quality mode on PlayStation 5 to match settings on the 5060. Now, there's a 30 FPS cap on PS5 in this mode that I've replicated on the PC version.
And remember, he's using FSR too. They're not even using DLSS. If they did, it'll get smoked because you know how that is with that new multi-frame. But the MS would spike.
And in this area where we're dropping frames on the console, we're not on the 5060. And in our classic benchmarking scene where the PlayStation 5 struggles to make a lock 30, the 5060 isn't. How much overhead is there without an FPS cap? The performance mode, essentially running on tweaked low settings, is enlightening. Repeating the static test, there's a 35% frame rate lead over the console, which remains in place across the benchmark sequence too.
Now, you know, if he puts DLSS on, it's going to absolutely obliterate it. Think about this, y'all. This is without DLSS on. And the point of the 50 series is definitely a more AI upscale than raw performance. I can tell you that. Rasterization, all that. So it's not even a competition. I would like to see it go against the Pro with DLSS on. He's just trying to give you the same things that the consoles have. That's why he says console settings and everything. So they're basically running the same thing. The difference here is this right here. But realistically, literally that's not reality. Nobody's going to turn on FSR2 if you go play Alan Wake 2 or any game. You're going to turn on DLSS 4 and you're going to smoke the shit out of that. And you're going to see like 100 and something frames per second here. It's literally no contest. But it is nice to see this type of equivalency to a certain degree. But this is nerfed big time. Whereas like this is his full capability. This is his major handicap settings right here.
So I'd say if you have a game not limited by 8 gigs of VRAM and you aren't PCIe bandwidth deprived, this $300 GPU can achieve nice results.
For $300.
One thing I should say about Alan Wake though, it's not an exact like-for-like test. RTX Mega Geometry is added as standard on the PC version when an RTX card is being used, which may be explaining part of this performance boost.
Yeah.
Multi-frame generation in Alan Wake 2. This visualization on PS5 performance mode equivalent settings, fine I'd say for a $300 GPU.
Now he turned on DLSS. 101, 142, 175 frames per second. See what I mean? Major leap.
GPU shows the plus and minus points.
But lower latency.
The stratospheric improvements to frame rate.
Sorry, higher latency, excuse me, because it causes that. That's why people turn on Nvidia auto latency reflex auto low latency, or whatever it is. I use that. It definitely helps.
But there is a latency penalty. Anything up to 25 milliseconds for 4x MFG. But you'll note that on this lower end GPU, the latency increase between 2x to 4x MFG is notable. More.
Yeah, he's talking about right here. So this means multi-frame generation of manipulating the frames per second. You're going to see a spike. Of course, this goes up. My thing with this is I don't care about this for games where I'm not being super competitive and they will get an advantage. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to do that. You'd want to keep that off. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah.
More notable than it is when using the same technology on higher end cards. The end user will have to not notice the extra lag or adjust base settings to get the initial latency into a good place.
You'll get used to it.
In terms of Alan Wake 2 here, fine if you're using a joypad, I'd say. So MFG, it does have a purpose, but successful use of it is, I'd say, more challenging on the lower end cards compared to the higher end GPUs where, well, let's face it, in an ideal world scenario, the feature should have a lot more value to the lower end buyer, where you'd want it to work just as well. Tune it right, and it can be used pretty well, of course. This is Black Myth Wukong at 1440p, DLSS balanced on high settings. You saw that earlier, basically PlayStation 5 settings with higher quality textures. Frame rates of around 170 to 200.
So this is the PlayStation settings with the 5060 with multi-frame generation times 4 at the highest. You know, multi-frame generation times 4. That's only available for DLSS 4, and he's getting 178 frames per second. We see this huge difference here. This is what I mean by like why Nintendo's going to get shortcuts too. DLSS is crazy.
FPS and average system latency of 45 milliseconds. I'd take this all day over the console version, and I'd prefer it over the non-MFG version. But it works because the base frame rate and the base latency are already very good. Not a given for every game, of course.
Yeah, of course.
In summary then, RTX 5060 is capable of good results if you embrace the concept of tuning and optimized settings, but what's frustrating here is that there are so many caveats and asterisks that need to be added to that statement. First of all, 8GB is a deal breaker in a world where you expect a GPU to last 3 to 5 years, and when new AAA games are already asking for more, especially when ray tracing is...
Well, that's the thing. You don't have to have on high ray tracing. You could turn that off and you will be fine, and you're not using up that VRAM. And you can still have way better settings in the consoles, but it's just not the VRAM settings because they automatically have 16 gigabytes. Automatically, because AMD does that better than NVIDIA. NVIDIA's annoying with that crap. I like what Intel is doing with the Arc series. Like, yeah, do that. Corner them. You know what I mean? People support that, you know? Because, yeah, I mean, NVIDIA and Microsoft, I don't know who's worse.
Is involved. From a compute perspective, the 5060 can do ray tracing pretty well, but not if the required memory to use that feature is not there. The VRAM requirement for games generally, well, it's not going to stay static. And from now on, I suspect it will continue to get higher. Second caveat, PCIe 3 bandwidth. I'd only really recommend 5060 for those with a PCIe 4.0 setup. Or
Yeah, of course, this is going to give you more increase. So this is getting more on the PC end. But you guys see the PlayStation 5, I mean, there's no way it's going to be able to compete. The only way it would have been able to somewhat look like that if somebody's trying to do a 16 gigabyte VRAM setting versus it, then it'll just look stupid if you're on an 8 gigabyte VRAM card. So here we got another comparison. What I want to see next is the PS5 Pro versus the RTX 5060. Because I don't think the Pro can compete with the 5060. But if it's a VRAM situation, yes, of course, because it has the same CPU, but it does have a little bit more RAM than the PS5. But even then, DLSS, MFG times 4, I mean, yeah, you stand no chance. And you can put a better CPU in your computer and more RAM. This is just to scale it down, you know what I mean? Like not dumbed down, not handicapped. Yeah, you stand no chance. And we see that here. So let me know what you guys think about this, all right? Hopefully they'll add an Xbox version, but I don't think they will do that separately again. They're just going to do PlayStation because they're pretty much almost identical. But the Series X is more powerful. But yeah, that's just what they wanted to do. All right, y'all. Peace. Have a great day.